Okay, so that's who wrote it, Moses, and it was written probably in the 15th century before Jesus Christ was born, the 15th century BC. Scholars still debate about which one is the right year. It's very hard to actually, because it's so old. The book is very old. Even the Egyptian empire is very old. And the historians are not quite sure exactly which king of Egypt is involved here and so on. But many conservative scholars would say it's about 1446 BC. The Exodus occurred around 1446 BC. How are they so sure? Because they calculate from, there are different verses in the Bible that talks about when the Temple of Solomon was built, it was 480 years after the Exodus and so on and so forth. So most historians know roughly when the Temple of Temple of God was built in Jerusalem. So they calculate back. And
so do we know roughly how many years after Joseph died?
So we are told by Exodus itself, okay, by Moses himself, that when they left Egypt, it was 430 years to the day that they came in. So Jacob came in with his family. And we are told here, we're told here in verse 1, these are the names of the sons of Israel. And Miss Jacob, who went to Egypt. And then we're told verse 5, the descendants of Jacob numbered 70 in all. Joseph was already in Egypt. So from this point onwards, okay, and we are told later on in Exodus chapter 12, verse 40 to 41. Chapter 12, okay, Exodus chapter 12, verse 40 and 41. Okay. Claudia, can you read it for us? Verse 40? 40, yeah.
Now the length of time that Israel people lived in Egypt was 430 years. At the end of the 430 years, to the very day, all the Lord's divisions left Egypt.
Okay, so 430 years from the first day that Jacob went in with his 70 descendants. When they left, it was 430 years later.
So after 400 years, these things happened.
Yeah. So 430 years later, these things happened. So Joseph had gone into Egypt, of course, before his family did. But counting from the day his father and his brothers came in to the day they all left Egypt was 430 years exactly, to the very day exactly. Okay? So 430 years.
They all died in Egypt.
So yes, and in Exodus chapter 1, back to Exodus chapter 1, all these people died in Egypt, right? Because verse chapter 1 tells us, verse 6, sorry. Now Joseph and all his brothers and all that generation died. They can't live for 430 years for sure, right? So they all died already. They had all died. And that's why in verse 8 we are told there was a new king, right? The new king who did not know about Joseph came to power in Egypt. 430 years later, of course, he wouldn't know Joseph, right? Okay, this is the river delta. The river Nile comes from here and it goes here. This is the Nile delta. It looks like a D, a Greek letter delta. So this is the land of Goshen, where the Jews, the Israelites, were placed. The kings of Egypt were largely on this part. That's where the Great Pyramids were built. The pyramids were the graves of the kings. So they were all largely here, Memphis, Heliopolis, and so on. They were largely here. And you put the Israelites up here, further away from them. But the Israelites were happy because they were farmers. They loved the green land over here. But you know why they were here? Why the Israelites were placed here?
The Egyptians don't like shepherds.
They don't like shepherds, yes. So they put the shepherds far away. They don't like the smelly smell of sheep. So they put up there and they live here. But you see, this is the sea. This is the Red Sea. This is a peninsula, Sinai Peninsula, and this is another sea. You can see the sea, right? Yeah? Gulf of Aqaba and the Gulf of Suez. And the Suez Canal goes up there. This is the Red Sea. Okay, so that's the map. Red Sea. All right. So going up again, you can see that this is water. This is water. This is water. This is where the Jews are, the Israelites are, and this is where the Egyptians are. And this is the whole of Africa. Okay, looking at this, any generals here who know a bit of strategy, and you know why the king of Egypt put the Israelites here?
So they won't be able to join him.
Yeah, keep them far away. Yeah, that's one reason. Their sheep are smelly, keep them away. They are far away from us. We are here. We are safe. They are over there. We can watch them when they cross down. There's a river. By the time they come down, we would have seen them. But a more important reason, think of beyond Israel. Think of Greece here. Think of Saudi Arabia here. Think of Syria and Turkey here. Assyria, Babylon over here. Babylon, Mesopotamia, Assyria, Persia, all here. Does it begin to ring a bell? Buffer, yes. Bill, Matt. All the powerful superpowers are over here. Iran or Persia, Babylon, Assyria. They need to come down this way to attack Egypt. Where do they cross? Not here. Here. They come down this way. And in fact, this is what they call the Fertile Crescent. It's a crescent up here. And this is the fertile area. And this is the trade route. This is Highway 401. So all the people from Greece, Alexander the Great came down here. Iran, the king of Persia, 300. King of Persia comes here, goes down here, this way. So the Israelites are there first. It's a buffer. Very, very clever. So they built 2 cities. We are told the Jews were made slaves, and they were there to build 2 cities, Pithom here and Ramses here. Today's name is Tanis, and this city is gone. It's a tell, it's a mound, just soil, hillock. Underneath is the ancient city. So Pithom and Ramses. These were the 2 cities they built. And we are told in verse Exodus, verse 11. So they put slave masters over them to oppress them with forced labor, and they built Pithom and Ramesses as store cities for Pharaoh. Store cities, some Bible translations say treasure cities. Probably there were cities where the king of Egypt stored things. What do you think he would be storing there that he needs to use when he moves up there? Why would the king of Egypt move from here to here? On what occasion would he need to move from here to here? You're not soldiers. Remember Iran, Persia, Babylon, Assyria? Yes, when these people come to attack, they have to move up to defend. And these two cities were here. They are on the route. They would have been storing things there. What things?
I mean your grains.
Weapons and food, grains. Because when they fight the war, it will be a long war, so they need to have store cities here. Makes a lot of sense. Okay.
It's Joseph, when Pharaoh told him you can choose whatever land you want.
Yes.
So Joseph chose him.
Joseph chose this also because he knows his people are farmers and shepherds. So he chose this too. Yeah, of course he didn't think about strategy and all that. But for the later Egyptians, they were very happy with that arrangement.
So it's
And
good
then-
for that time.
Yeah, and then the king of Egypt now starts building 2 cities there because he uses it as cities to store weapons and cities to store food, so that when he moves his soldiers up there, they don't have to move food and weapons at the same time. Many, many centuries later, in Operation Gulf Storm #1, George H.W. Bush. When they were going through Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, they had to go around the Iraqi armies by the back of the desert. The general that helped make that happen, he sent his logistics troops ahead into the desert and placed weapons and ammunition and food all along the way. So that when the soldiers, American soldiers, went up the desert, go behind Kuwait, they had food and the weapons already there in the desert. They didn't have to carry along. Yeah. Okay. I was a logistics army officer, so I know it. Yes.
I think there's a Sinai Peninsula where it's all the desert areas, so
Yes.
that's the reason why the Egyptians moved them away so that would be able to get all over to the other side.
The desert is here, yeah, the Sinai desert. And nobody would come down here, it's all dry. So they go along here, they go trading into Egypt, they go trading into Greece, Turkey, and so on. They use this road. This is the 401, as I say. It says the way of the sea. It's a highway 401.
Because they cannot go through
They can, but it doesn't make sense to go down through the desert. It's all sand.
Not Sama hospitals.
Mount Sinai Hospital. Okay, so this is the way, and so we will read later on in the book of Moses, when Moses led the people out of Egypt. The best way to go to Israel, which is here. What's the best way? 401, right?
Yeah.
God said, no, you don't go by that way. Because the soldiers of Egypt will chase you and they'll catch up. They have got Ferraris. You only got Nissan, Kia, or whatever. Yeah? And they've got Ferraris, they'll catch up with you. So that's not the way to go. They went down this way into the desert. And Egypt, even if Egypt crossed the water, it will be very hard to look for them and chase them. So God had his way, and God brought them through something that maybe is more this way, right? But most traditional scholars think it's down this way and up this way. Okay, we'll read about that. It's just right now, today, I just give you the background and the introduction to help you get excited about this wonderful book we're going to read. Okay, a lot of things will make sense when you know the background. Now, the book of Genesis, as I said, is a story of Jacob going down into Egypt with his descendants, and they stayed there because things were good, and they stayed there for 430 years. And the book of Exodus begins by telling us, I am continuing the story. Because, as I said, Exodus 1 verse 1 is a repeat of Exodus 46 verse 8 and only verses number 1. Number 2, very important actually, you don't see it in the English translation, but in the Hebrew version of the book of Exodus, the first word is and. A-N-D, a conjunction. And these are the names of the sons of Israel. When do you, okay, John is a science teacher, he's not an English teacher. English teachers in Canada will tell you, no, you cannot start a sentence with and. It's a conjunction. So you have to have something in front. These are the people of Israel, and they came to Egypt with Jacob. You can put an and in the middle of the sentence to join two sentences or two clauses. The writer of Exodus, Moses himself, began this chapter with an end because he was to join Genesis. The whole book of Genesis is before this book. So that's the story of Genesis, and this is the story of Exodus. It's a continuation. And he makes it very clear. Well, chapter 46, verse 8, and chapter 1, verse 1, exactly the same words. And a summary of how Jacob came down with 70 people, and they stayed in Egypt. And then the transition. Okay, you start a story, right? It's a serial, right? It's Star Wars 1, Star Wars 2, Star Wars 3. Or it is Back to the Future 1, Back to the Future 2, Back to the Future 3. At the beginning, there is a short summary of what happened in the previous movie. Or the previous episode. You watch Korean drama, the same thing, right? Yeah? last week, this is what happened, a summary, and then to this week, this is what will happen. And you watch, and the next week they will do the same again, summarized last week in the first few seconds. So it is summarized, verses 1 to 6, what happened in Genesis for 50 chapters. And now there's a new king. So the storyteller moves on very fast. That was in Genesis, and now there's a new king. Now the book of Exodus has 40 chapters. Genesis is 50, Exodus is 40 chapters. And in the 40 chapters of Exodus, 430 years are covered. Maybe 431 years. 431, 432. But the first 430 years go up. Chapter 1, chapter 2, God. And then chapter 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way to 40 is all about 1 year. Why does the author do this?
Very important.
Because that 1 year is very important. 430 years are not that important. Yeah, you need to understand that 430 years went through and a lot of suffering and all that. But that's not the story I'm telling you, Moses says. That's just enough for chapter 1 and chapter 2. For the other 38 chapters now, I'm going to talk to you about this 1 year in our lives that none of you should ever forget. Okay, so bear that in mind. You find that chapter 3 to chapter 14 is all about what happened in 1 year. And 430 years go by, 2 chapters. All right. So there's a new king. Of course, he doesn't know Joseph. It's been too many years. If you study the history, most scholars, I won't go through the process of how they come to this conclusion. But most scholars actually point out that Egypt had many, just like any country, had many dynasties. And some of these dynasties were foreign dynasties, just like China. China had Chinese dynasties, but there were foreign dynasties, the Yuan, who were the Mongols, and the Qing, who were the Manchus. And they were foreigners, they came in and they ruled China. The Egyptians had the same thing. During the early years, when Joseph was there, probably there was this group of people, they were foreigners. They were Semitic people from Palestine. They conquered Egypt and they were the Hyksos dynasty. They ruled Egypt, and Joseph himself is one of them. You know, he's part of the Semitic people, the Israelites, the Arabs and Syrians and all, they were Semitic people. So they were in power in Egypt, and then they were conquered by the Egyptians again. So by the time of the Exodus, when the Egyptian king was oppressing the Israelites, it was a different dynasty. They were now the local Egyptians. They've taken over their own country. So they are very scared of foreigners now, from historical experience. Okay, they don't want any more foreigners. So with that history, you realize that, okay, so they have good reason to be very, very wary, very, very cautious of the Jews who are growing in large numbers.